Started with one photo, one connection, one name. Ran it through Google Images, reverse search and no shame. Found 3 more photos, found a flight log, found a date. Cross-reference with public records, now I'm up to 8. Tagged it in the Discord, someone found the company. Someone else found the offshore account in Belize. Someone else found the board members, the donations, the chain. Now we got 47 people mapping the campaign. 1 becomes 2 becomes 10 becomes more. Truth has a network effect we can't ignore. Every connection reveals 10 more doors. This is the cascade, this is the score. Truth cascade, watch it domino. One investigation leads to another, watch it go. Truth cascade, we can't stop the flow. Every cover up connected, now the whole world knows. Cascade, cascade, truth cascade, cascade can't be delayed. Can't be delayed. Metadata embedded in the image. We extracted the GPS from the location, found the property records, found the LLC, found the shell company, found the parent corp, found the CEO. Cross-reference biblical donations, now we got the quid pro quo. Someone made a spreadsheet, someone made a map, someone made a timeline, someone made a slab, someone made a TikTok thread, 2 million views in a day. Someone made a GitHub repo, organized the array. 1 becomes 5 becomes 50 becomes spread. Truth is exponential once it leaves your head. Every whistleblower empowers 10 more instead. This is the cascade, this is the thread. Truth cascade, watch it domino. 1 investigation leads to another, watch it go. Truth cascade, we can't stop the flow. Every cover up connected, now the whole world knows. Cascade, cascade, truth cascade, cascade can't be delayed. They try to compartmentalize, separate the scandals, keep the connections hidden, but we're digital vandals, taking down the walls between the separate lives, watching the cascade reveal the enterprise. 1 truth leads to another, 1 name leads to another, 1 dot leads to another, 1 thread. That's the cascade. Truth cascade, watch it domino. 1 investigation leads to another, watch it go. Truth cascade, we can't stop the flow. Every cover up connected, now the whole world knows. Cascade, truth cascade, it's exponential. 1 person finds a thread, becomes existential. Truth cascade, it's consequential. Every secret that they bury now is preferential. Cascade, cascade, truth cascade, cascade, cascade can't be delayed. Can't be delayed. Cascade, cascade, truth cascade. Started with 1 photo, ended with 500 connections. That's the cascade. That's the power. I woke up to silence, but the war had begun. They froze my account, said I'd done something wrong. Wasn't no crime, just living free. Now the system got a chain on me. They took my savings, my future, my land. a single code line and a government hand. Said it was safety, said it was green. But all I see is tyranny behind the screen. This ain't innovation, it's a trap in disguise. You'll own nothing, be watched all your life. Genius ain't freedom, gravity ain't clear. It's a cage they built while we cheer. I believed in the promise, the man with a plan. But the same old swamp just changed its brand. He banned the front door, opened the back, signed the bills that launched the final attack. This ain't innovation, it's a trap in disguise. You'll own nothing, be watched all your life. Genius ain't freedom, quality ain't clear. It's a cage they built while we cheer. Your gold, your guns, your voice, your name. They'll digitize it all, then shift the blame. Palantirizing AI chains, freedom dying slow in patriotic flames. This ain't about safety, it's control in disguise. With your ID, your face, your tears, your time, they wrapped it in stars, sold it with pride. But freedom's bleeding out from the inside. DEFCON 1, and they call it peace, but I still got breath, I still believe we can break the code, escape the scheme, turn this nightmare back into a dream. cash flow. Thought we'd roll over and die, but underground is rising, growing stronger every day. When they shut the front door down, we found another way. We go low when they go high, build beneath the watchful eye. Sovereign money, sovereign mind, leave their broken world behind. We go low, we go low. Parallel systems humming quiet underneath the digital riot. They can't stop what they can't see, building our way to free. We go low when they go high, build beneath their watchful eye. Sovereign money, sovereign mind, leave their broken world behind. So low, we go low. Yeah. We go low. We go low. Live free or die, but death's not the worst. It's waking up empty, it's dying of thirst. Trading your days for insurance and pills, while the machine builds your cage and you're paying the bill. Quiet desperation, that's the real grave. A life half lived as a comfortable slave. This ain't what you were born for, you know it's true. You feel it in your chest, breaking through. They're wiring the walls, closing in, tracking your dollars underneath your skin. Left and right, same throne, same crown. No one stands up, no one makes a sound. They hand you a ballot like it means something real. Two wings of one bird, same deal, same steel. We say no, no to the chase, no to the dollar running through our veins, no to the white coats, no to the lies. This is the day that we rise. It's hers right here, it's hers right now. Your rights are yours, you take them back, not giving out. Not from the left, not from the right. They were always yours, now step into the light. The daylight breaks, a new day comes. We take it back, every last one. Live free or die, we fan the flame. Nothing will ever be the same. Fan the flame.
All right, welcome back to the Aaron Day Show. This is season 3, episode 7. So let me just pop these slides up here real quick. Wow, quite a bit to talk about. It has been an exceptional week with just chock full of incredible developments across the board. I think this might actually be episode 6, my bad. Season 3, episode 6, Epstein's secret Bitcoin hijacking exposed. So if you have been following me on X, you'll note that I've been talking about this kind of nonstop since the release of the documents. We've been talking about the Clarity Act and the importance of stopping the Clarity Act. You have the Genius Act, which basically puts in a programmable system to track everything that you pay. The Clarity Act will put in a tokenization system that controls everything that you own. And when I say that with tokenization, it basically is putting in a technology that will allow third parties, namely the government, to be able to track all of your transactions, not just what you buy and sell, but the assets that you own, program those transactions, and even censor them. So it's much worse than even just a CBDC. So for the last several episodes, I've been talking about that in various ways. However, the Epstein files leaked, or not leaked, but were released at the end of the month in January. And I have been going through those, as of course have many others, but I've been building this site, Technocracy Atlas. So I've downloaded all 3 million documents and am in the process. I have about 800,000 of the documents up on the website and have been going through them. And let me just say, wow. First of all, I mean, complete vindication with respect to what I have been saying, which we'll be going through tonight, my Brownstone article that was just released today. Complete vindication that shows that, in fact, Jeffrey Epstein was directly involved in funding the hijacking of Bitcoin, but heavily involved in crypto in general since about 2011 through Brock Pierce, who I did an entire episode about last season. And this leads into Tether and Howard Lutnick. All of it is connected. I speculated that it was connected in a couple of episodes last year. But I said at the time, you can tell, how did these people connect? How did all this get put together? We now know explicitly how it got put together. These Epstein files, the thing that's the most important about the Epstein files is not the sex stuff. The sex stuff is horrible. And obviously people involved in that should be dealt with accordingly. But the real insight from the Epstein file is how power works and how decisions get made. I spend a lot of time in a variety of different contexts explaining to people that things are not how they appear on the surface. Politicians don't have the power. It is people behind the scenes driving the power. What we are actually fighting isn't red versus blue or, the United States versus other countries. It's actually, a technocratic agenda. It's large, multinational corporations, but it's about 500 people that are pushing a global technocratic agenda. That's actually what we're up against. And when I say that, it seems remote. It seems very removed because we have this expectation that, well, no, we have these political parties, we have this democratic process, and this is how things work. And that's not how things work. The Epstein file shows how things work. It shows how power works. It shows how money works. And it shows how it works with many layers underneath. One of the things that I find fascinating, I knew this already, but that I hope other people learn, and is one of the things that comes out of this is, for instance, Epstein doesn't invest directly in any of these companies, right? I mean, he's a convicted, pedophile. And so no one's going to want his name on a cap table or on a share certificate. So what you see through these emails is how he goes about investing in these various organizations, whether it's MIT or whether it's to invest in Coinbase, the big cryptocurrency exchange that we talk about quite often on this show related to the Genius and Clarity Acts, whether it's how he invested in Blockstream. But then beyond that, it's not even Epstein necessarily investing his own money. He's investing money for other people. And one of the things that we learned, and you know what, you want to talk about the conspiracy theory of conspiracy theories, it turns out that Epstein is managing money for the Rothschild family, right? I mean, this is one of those things where you mentioned the Rothschilds, you mentioned the Rockefellers, and people are like, oh, well, this is tinfoil hat stuff. Nope, sure enough, there are emails. There's the agreement. He's paid $25 million to manage money for the Rothschild family. And then there's an email literally between Jeffrey Epstein and Peter Thiel saying, when he's reaching out to Thiel for presumably the first time or early on in the relationship, as you may know, I manage investments for the Rothschilds in technology. So this is just incredible information. And what I've done, so with the Technocracy Atlas that I've created, not only do I have all of the other document drops from Epstein, but we have all the other information that we've loaded in there. We have all of Patrick Wood's information, Courtney Turner's information, Whitney Webb's information. I built this because as we talk about AI and as we've learned from Mike Adams, language models are just a way to interact with data. What data you're interacting with is what really matters. And when you're using ChatGPT and these other models, they've trained this information on things like Reddit, which, by the way, we now know Ghislaine Maxwell had a massive influence on the structure of the data of Reddit. So it's not even unfair to say that a lot of these large language models were heavily influenced by Ghislaine Maxwell's influence on Reddit. It's crazy when you look at those things. But what I said was, look, I can't get any information out of these LLMs. When I'm doing any of the research that I do, any of the stuff that I write, I can't use these mainstream models to actually get information. This has always been the case. So I'm like, okay, I bought a 126 terabyte hard drive, and I'm like, I'm going to download all of this information, and then I'm going to use a language model so that people can interact with that information. And then took it to the next step where we're going to be able to crowdsource research together. Because when you talk about something like the hijacking of Bitcoin, I literally know people. I mean, I, to a certain degree, have been involved in it, but I know people that are principal actors that have been there the whole time. They have they're legitimate first sources. They have information that they can put. So we're obviously not going to get any information out of the DOJ or anywhere else, but if we want to actually try to learn the truth, we can maybe crowdsource it together. So I have all these different databases, but then I've added the Pandora Papers, the Panama Papers. You may remember a few years back, I guess maybe it's even longer than that now, a group of independent journalists got together. It was released through, I think, from a lawyer or an accounting firm, all of this data on all of these trust accounts and foreign accounts all around the world. I think we have something like 13.5 million records, account records from there. That, by the way, I can now map to Epstein. There's even an email in there of Epstein saying, I'm worried about the Pandora Papers. So we now have the ability to start connecting dots and pieces that have never been put together. And to be honest, even when these investigative journalists were working on this data, they're not financial experts. So they may be able to cobble this together, but they don't know who these people are or even how necessarily money flows. So we are going to learn about how the entire world works through this information. It is that powerful, and it will change people's entire view of reality and how things work and what the motivations are and who the players actually are. You know, we're sitting here saying we're playing by the Constitution, and then we have people with no morality representing foreign countries and other interests that are pushing a completely separate agenda. And they're doing it covertly. They're manipulating the media. I read a thing, I was just reading this afternoon, where Epstein was able to edit and manipulate his Wikipedia page. And he was working with Steve Bannon to repair his image. He was able to get a convicted sex offender removed from his page, and then they went in and figured out how to take the IP addresses of everyone that was going in and trying to modify his page and have them blocked so that they couldn't edit his page. So I'm giving you just some of the tidbits here in the intro. Obviously, the focus today is going to be specifically on Bitcoin, but I encourage you, and now with this also said, the Technocracy Atlas, I don't have all the documents loaded. I'm going to show you the Technocracy Atlas, but I'm not Still wait until I get the rest of the documents uploaded and make a few other changes before we go full force on it. Like I want it needs to be a bit easier to use, but it's getting close. I even am duplicating that, you may say, Gmail, where somebody took Epstein's emails and basically made them available in like a Gmail type of viewer. I've done that as well. I'm replicating that, but I'm replicating that so that you can go through the emails and you can say, okay, I'm going to tag this and I'm going to add it to a project. So we're working on the Epstein's involvement in crypto project. Here's an email, tag it, and then boom, it's there. And now everybody that's working on that project can see that piece of evidence. It's really cool. I'm really excited about it. And by the way, today's episode was supposed to be about launching ownnothing.com or .org. I think it's .org. And that was originally what we had talked about last week, but events are moving so quickly that, I guess I would say I don't usually schedule these things out very far in the future. And I'm definitely not going to, based on everything that's going on in the world related to Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, technocracy. In fact, we have a real window. I will say I'm actually pretty optimistic. I mean, the odds, we still have to move very quickly, and the odds are not in our favor. I mean, we're not like Epstein, who won the lottery twice. We don't have those kinds of odds, but this Epstein thing has blown everything open. It's blown crypto open. You can see ties to both political parties, ties to people in the administration, including Howard Lutnick, who I've talked about, including to Trump, including to all of it. And the Clarity Act, I just learned an hour or two ago, has been pushed back. So they're not going to be bringing that back until the spring. So there had been some discussion that they might vote on it this week. So we've actually bought some time, and I actually think that this Epstein thing is going to increase the odds of us being able to make a persuasive case, or not even us make a persuasive case. I think it's going to be pretty toxic for politicians to even deal with this stuff. So I'll get into the details on that. I'm going to go through the normal intro stuff. I will say I have a hard stop at, say, 8:50. I'm going to be on another podcast. I'm going to be, I believe, live with Bitcoin.com talking about the Clarity Act. So if I do, just give you forewarning, if we get into the Q&A, it might not even go that long today, but if we get into the Q&A and I have to shut it off a little early, that's why. So last week's episode was 120 days, and it was about the architects of Tether, essentially, and what's going on with the Genius and Clarity Acts, but with kind of a little bit of an emphasis on Tether and the fact that this guy, Bo Hines, came out of nowhere, no crypto experience, was recruited to be Trump's crypto advisor, got involved, pushed the Genius Act, and then immediately left to become the president of Tether USA. And then they actually literally launched last week USAT, which is Tether, which is a regulated stablecoin that can be tracked and frozen, where the treasuries are backed by the company owned by U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, who's tied to Epstein and all this other stuff. And so we kind of walked through all of that. And that was just kind of a short little podcast. And as we do these, obviously these are going to build as we learn more information. And then, the week before that, we did kind of the first high level overview of the Genius Act, the Clarity Act, and then the two versions of essentially the Clarity Act that are currently in the Senate. And that was kind of a prelude to the article that I wrote for the Brownstone Institute. So tonight we're going to be talking about, I wrote a 12,000 word article on Genius and Clarity. And it's not just Genius and Clarity. It's about the political process itself. It's about financial regulation. It's about how the political process works. I wanted it to be kind of the definitive thing. And so I had actually submitted that to Brownstone maybe on Monday. And then all this stuff happened with Epstein. I'm like, man, I've got to write something because I've been talking about it anyway, about the hijacking of Bitcoin and the context of Epstein and what we've learned from that. So I actually did a really, I just kind of jammed through and wrote that article, which was published today and is what we're going to be talking about today. Just as a reminder that part of the issue that we have here is we have politicians going around the country saying the war on crypto is over and the United States is going to lead the world in crypto. And in reality, what's happened is the war on crypto has actually been extended. You have people like, Ian Freeman, who is in prison for 8 years. He's literally in prison, federal prison right now, for selling Bitcoin essentially without a license, even though he had an opinion letter stating he didn't need a license. And then on the other hand, you have banks. And in some cases, I talked about, I think it's Wachovia, was involved in Wachovia or Wells Fargo, hundreds of billions of dollars of money laundering, billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars in money laundering for cartels. No one went to jail. In the article that I wrote, the longer one, it's going to go into all of this to just explain, because I want to change the way people even think about these bills. We don't need the bills at all. We don't need market structure, and we certainly don't need market structure from the people that have crashed the dollar, added $38 trillion in debt, tried to hide the Epstein files. The invisible hand, as Adam Smith described it, has worked well for hundreds of years. We don't need the visible hand of Congress, and I kind of explain in the article what that looks like. But we still have our crypto prisoners of war. Ian's there. So I encourage you to go to freeiannow.org and sign the petition for encouraging Trump to pardon him. We have Roman Storm. We have Keone Rodriguez, Will Smith, the Samurai developers. We have basically open source developers that wrote code to protect our privacy and our Fourth Amendment right, who also got opinion letters stating that what they were doing was legal. And, they were, their trials occurred and they were sentenced under Trump since the war on crypto was declared over. So you may remember when Bush was on that aircraft carrier and it said, mission accomplished. I mean, this is kind of like, the mission most certainly was not accomplished. This is the same thing that's happened with this war on crypto. So on this show, we continue to advocate for these crypto prisoners, but also highlight the fact that the crypto war isn't over, and that actually these bills, the Genius Act and the Clarity Act, are an extension of it. These bills are actually adding surveillance and tracking to everything that we own and every financial transaction that we do. So they are the war on crypto. I think today, I don't know if it was a joke or not. It's hard to process some of this stuff, but Kamala Harris has announced she's running again. And one of the things people say to me is, well, it's certainly better than if Kamala won. And honestly, I can say with respect to this crypto stuff, absolutely not. If she won, she would have put in her own team of DEI incompetent people to build a CBDC from scratch, and they would screw it up and it would never get implemented. Trump allowed the biggest technocrats in the world to come in and or captured existing successful private companies and put them under the regulation, tracking, and control of the federal government. Not that I would vote for any of it, but it isn't true that people. I don't think people can make that statement that it would have been better. Everybody gets into this. Oh well, it's a lesser of two evils. I mean, we buy into this propaganda and then we accept it, and then it becomes demoralizing, and then each election becomes a bigger humiliation ritual than the one before it. So I put some of this in here. These are some memes that I created over the last few days. And if you're new, I'm going to explain some of this. I'm not intending to be hostile. There are some people that are like, well, why are you being so negative? Why don't you offer solutions? And if you're new to this podcast, I offer solutions all of the time. I mean, I wrote a book. I ran for president. My wife and I have gone to 27 states, 3 countries, educating people about technocracy, the threat of technocracy, the threat of CBDCs, and then actually doing workshops showing people how to use privacy coins like Zano, or to use privacy stable coins like Freedom Dollar, or how to make their Bitcoin and Ethereum private with confidential layer, how we've built a global medical tourism marketplace so that you can escape the horrendous healthcare system that we have that bankrupts an American every minute and provides 38th ranked care with the highest costs in the world. You don't have to put up with any of that. You can form a medical trust. You can cancel your insurance. You can use medical tourism and save 80% and get better health outcomes. So we're building solutions and also connecting to other people that have solutions. We're building tools to help people improve their sovereignty. But for the last 7 years, I've been talking about how Bitcoin was hijacked. Others have been talking about it more. Certainly people like Roger Ver, who was at the front of it, who wrote the book that you can see, behind me, Hijacking Bitcoin. And, the people that have been speaking about this, that have the loudest voice, have been targeted by the federal government. They're either in federal prison or they were facing, in Roger's case, 109 years in federal prison. And I believe it was for a combination of trying to speak the truth about this, but then also those people were working on alternative solutions that can help people to escape central banks and all of these other things. So the people that had the loudest voice and the best voice, they've been silenced. And so I get when an opening comes up like this, when what we know is that, Bitcoin got to where it was hijacked by Epstein and others, which I'll go into, but it's been a massive campaign of propaganda and censorship. People have been blocked, silenced. I wrote the other day, this guy, Adam Back, who it turns out is the head of Blockstream, a Bitcoin company, heavily involved, works with Bitcoin core developers. He was involved, and he was with Epstein, and I believe on Epstein's island. I mean, and the Blockstream company that benefited by basically handicapping Bitcoin and making it slow and expensive and capping the block size so that Bitcoin can only do 7 transactions per second. The people that formed the company to profit from that had the chairman of the Bilderberg Group, Jeffrey Epstein, and many others. This is the cast of characters of people that we now know explicitly were involved in the hijacking of Bitcoin. And so most people don't know that. So if you're on my Twitter feed, there'll be Bitcoin maxis that are absolutely beside themselves. They're going nuts about this, and they don't want to hear about it because from their perspective, they see that it's causing the price to drop. But from my perspective, most people, as I said, we've gone to 27 different states. When I talk to people outside of a Twitter crypto bubble, 99% of people, 99.9% of people don't know that Bitcoin it was designed to be a currency. They don't know that people were using it to buy and sell things. They don't know that there was such a thing as a block size war. They have no idea that Jeffrey Epstein had anything to do with it. And when I tell them that, they're shocked. I mean, seriously, and this has been going on now for 3.5 years where we've been giving these talks. So what goes on online? So somebody will say again, well, you're not providing any solutions or anything else. No, I've provided solutions, but right now is the moment for the truth to finally get out. That the people who've been trying to tell the story about Bitcoin being hijacked, that have been thrown in prison, threatened, and have not been able to speak because of the propaganda and censorship, this is the window to do that. So I'm going to take advantage of that window. And in addition to the article and the interview I did with Jeffrey Tucker, I have a ton of interviews lined up. And I actually want to thank all of you because I know I've been getting a ton of inquiries. And last week I said, listen, I need help. All of the podcasts that I've ever done on other shows, I never reached out to anybody and said, hey, have me on. It's all happened organically. People have reached out to me either because of my writings or books, or they've heard word of mouth or whatever. And so I'm pretty sure that some of these new podcasts that I'm going to be on over the next couple of weeks are from you guys reaching out. And I encourage you to continue to do that. I think the way that we win is through truth and authenticity. I see people trying to get on this show all the time where I have what I think are fake agents, because it's like somebody that's got, well, here's this person with a little story. And then there's, I think they had AI create a fake booking agent to come in. And then they write these like long paragraph things. And it's like, the first paragraph is always like, well, I saw your show on XYZ. So it's clear they scraped the title. And then when you read the rest of it, it's clear that they didn't watch the podcast and have no idea what the podcast is about. And the guest has nothing to do with the show. And that's what most of this is. And so a lot of the internet traffic is fake. A lot of the stories are fake. We have a lot of bots. I think we win with authenticity. So please continue. And by the way, you have no idea how much power you have. You may not know, whatever your favorite podcast is, besides this one, of course, but your other favorite podcasts, you might think, well, I've never talked to this guy before, but still, If you're a listener and you're like, hey, I'm a listener, I like this, you don't have to know the person. I got on Mike Adams for, this way. The person made the introduction, didn't have a personal relationship with Mike Adams, but was a longtime, watcher. So thank you for that. And please continue to do it. We have a window of opportunity to not only educate the public about Bitcoin, which is important and we'll talk about later, but also we have an opportunity now to get the word out about the Clarity Act. I think the Clarity Act actually can be stopped at this point simply because the Epstein stuff is so bad. And it even includes Coinbase now. The largest lobbyist for the Genius Act and the Clarity Act is Coinbase and their CEO, Brian Armstrong. And we now know, Epstein was an early investor, and, there's a whole bunch of other stuff coming out there that really casts a lot of doubt on all of this. And it's certainly, you can make the argument that, people were trying to claim that this guy, the Coinbase CEO, was the champion for the little guy and fighting the big bad bankers at Davos. And it's all fake. And now we can bring evidence into that. This is another meme I put together. Michael Saylor, I played this video clip and I posted it yesterday. I've played it on this show several times. It's a 3-minute and 18-second clip. I probably should have played it in the intro instead of one of the songs. It's Roger Ver talking for 2 minutes from Liberty Forum in like 2012, 2013, and was one of the main reasons I got inspired to get into crypto. And he's talking about, this is going to enable people all over the world to engage in trade without banks, no friction. We won't be funding all these wars. Great energy. I mean, it was electrifying. I know several people that were in that room that day. That was like an electric thing. And then there's this video clip from Michael Saylor who says, well, Bitcoin is not for competing with Visa or MasterCard or the dollar or the euro. It's for complying with know your customer laws. It's for paying your taxes and everything else. To me, that 3-minute and 18-second clip is all you need to know about the hijacking of Bitcoin, which is why I play it very often. But now today, I think I think there's a Wall Street Journal article on it. I'll have to check. Somebody sent it to me. I think perhaps during the .com era, Michael Saylor had lost more money in one day than anyone up to that point, kind of in history. He had lost $6 billion in one day. And I believe he might have actually beaten that today. So there's a Wall Street Journal article. Here we go. There we go. Yeah. Bitcoin boosters $12 billion loss headlines crypto's worst day since 2022 crash. So Michael Saylor's strategy lost $12 billion today. He 2x'd his .com record loss. Again, this is the guy that's the front he's the face for hijacked Bitcoin. And so it's all coming out. And this was inevitable, but I've been trying to warn people, others have for a long time. And now we can start to provide some context to this. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about the article that I wrote, which is at Brownstone. You can actually see it at the Brownstone site. It's actually on the front page. So if you go to brownstone.org, it's right on the front page called The Hijacking of Bitcoin. And Jeffrey put a nice little post out. This article helped crash the market. Fascinating. Again, this isn't necessarily a really long and elaborate article like some of the other ones, but what I put in there, which we'll go through, are the actual emails, the actual smoking guns. The other thing is, and I'm going to post this on my X account tomorrow, but I did an interview. It's in case you didn't know, because it's new. The Brownstone Institute has their own podcast now called The Brownstone Show. So I encourage you to check that out. Really high quality stuff. Great guests. Jeffrey's awesome. Jeffrey's my favorite person to interview with. I've actually come to find I don't like actually preparing presentations. When I prepare presentations, it's too, I don't know, it's too extensive. It's kind of too forced, but like Jeffrey knows exactly how to move a conversation, and because he's smart and he knows what he's talking about, he can actually get to the really interesting bits. And so this interview was really important to me because I've known Jeffrey since probably 2012, maybe around 2013, right around when we learned about Bitcoin. And Jeffrey is actually probably one of the most influential people in the world at opening up the original version of Bitcoin, the Bitcoin version that Roger Ver talked about. He wrote a book about it. And, being, an economist and someone that has, great kind of stature and understanding about monetary policy and economics, he was able to describe the importance of Bitcoin from a monetary perspective and from an economic perspective. And that brought a lot of people in. And when I was doing the podcast with him, he discussed kind of the same thing that happened to me. Early on, there was all this excitement. People understood, at least seemed to have some kind of understanding of how money worked and how this invention would work to be an improvement upon the existing system. And then all of a sudden, around 2017, the narrative would shift, and then people would call Jeffrey and they would say, "Hey, Jeffrey, we're not doing this as peer-to-peer digital cash anymore. You didn't get the memo? This is a store of value." And Jeffrey's like, well, that's not how it works. Something, in order to be a store of value, it needs to be a medium of exchange for. And he's explaining these things, and then the people are like discounting what he has to say. And so for years, he got out of it then. And I didn't get out of crypto then, but I did get out of Bitcoin then because I couldn't use it anymore. I was using it here in New Hampshire to go to stores, to go to restaurants. I was using it for political activism. I was actually raising money for a super PAC and paying activists using cryptocurrency. And then all of a sudden, the transactions were $50. They went from like a few pennies with transactions settling in a minute or two to, 7 days to complete a transaction and $50. So I stopped using it because it wasn't useful. But then, what we learn, and Roger Ver had a front row seat to all of it as it was going on. There was a big debate internally, which is, do we increase the size of these blocks, as was originally discussed in the paper, in the white paper, so that you can do more transactions, so that you can scale, so you can compete with Visa or MasterCard? Do we do what the original plan was, or all of a sudden this new thing came in and said, well, no, we're going to keep it slow. And then we're going to build this thing called a second layer solution. And all of a sudden we're going to start calling it digital gold. Like, no. So, so all of a sudden they're not listening to Jeffrey, and Jeffrey's like, and then you're kind of an outcast if you hold this view that, you should be using these things as digital cash. And so now it's all come full circle. I mean, we knew kind of what the inevitably was going to happen, but as we've watched this the last few days, at one point today, Bitcoin was 61,000 something. It was 72,000 yesterday. I mean, it's crashed. The all-time high was $126,000, and it's related to. Well, I like to put it this way. So once you understand that Bitcoin was hijacked and can't be used as digital cash without using these other things that actually involve KYC, and they don't actually even work, then you're down to, okay, is it effective digital gold? So the reason I think that the price has dropped as much as it has in the last few weeks or months is twofold. One, it was presented as digital gold, but silver and gold were outperforming Bitcoin. So it turns out that I think most people are starting to wake up to the fact that the dollar is failing. And so most people are saying, well, I'm not going to hold my money in a bank account that I don't own and earn 0.1% interest. What am I going to do here? Where am I going to store my value? And it turns out increasingly people are not deciding to choose Bitcoin, despite the fact all of the branding and all the propaganda is digital gold. So as gold went above $5,000 an ounce, as silver went above $100 an ounce, people are like, well, their strategy was to way to cope with it was to say, well, it's going to cycle back in. People are going to take their profits from gold and silver and put it into Bitcoin. Well, that didn't happen. So then people are kind of like, uh-oh, is this thing actually a good store of value? Then the Epstein information comes out. And what that does is it casts doubt on even the whole transition to it becoming a store of value. Now, I understand, and if you're new to this podcast, you may not have heard of any of this before. You may be like most of the people that I've spoken to as we've traveled. You didn't know people were using Bitcoin to buy airline tickets through Expedia, or to buy furniture at overstock.com, or to buy things at Microsoft. You probably have never heard of that before. Most people that I've spoken to in the United States only know of Bitcoin as being a speculative asset or this digital gold thing. Well, now people are saying, well, is it a good store of value? And the fact that it's not doing well against silver and gold is one thing, but then you dig deeper, and I'm kind of front running the going through the article here, but what you find is that all of the main shift here happened in 2017. Epstein funded the developers that kind of cemented the technical changes to make Bitcoin slow and expensive and not usable as digital cash. And then the price went up. So the price was going up for Bitcoin in 2017, largely because people were starting to use it as a currency. But then when it became unusable, the price dropped. But then the price went back up again. It went up huge. Well, it turns out the University of Texas at Austin did a study of this, that at least 50% of the increase in the price of Bitcoin was due to Tether. And it appears as though, based on the fact that they weren't able to pass an audit and were found to not have the necessary assets backing the stablecoin, that they were printing Tether out of thin air and then using it to inflate the price of Bitcoin. So in other words, they manufactured the technical changes and the narrative change to say that Bitcoin is a store of value, and then they artificially pumped the price of Bitcoin to get people to believe it. Well, now that we know that, and we put all these pieces together, now that people are seeing today, 9 years later, that it's not holding up relative to gold and silver, and now we go back and look back and we can see the history of this, and the history of it suggests that the whole thing was fake. That puts significant pressure and doubt on Bitcoin. And I will say this, the price of Bitcoin may go back up. I'm not giving financial advice, but in order for it to go up, in my opinion, it would have to be based on either fraud or force. And when I say force in the sense that it would have to be governments forcing their citizens to, buy it through taxation, or it would be through, continuing to push this fake narrative, and then to get financial advisors to have 401ks and pension funds and so forth buy it. Now, I will tell you on that front, based simply on the volatility, if you are somebody that manages a pension fund for an organization, or maybe it's government employees or whatever it happens to be, and you're sitting around and you're trying to figure out how you're going to allocate your assets, and somebody's going to say, hey, this thing's lost 50% of its value in a few months, and now people are saying that Jeffrey Epstein is involved. Well, these are risk managers. And to be honest with you, like when you're trying to balance risk reward, the reward part doesn't look very appealing here. Now that Bitcoin is a $1 trillion asset, in order for the price to move, you actually have to have pretty significant volume, and you have to have people that are willing to invest quite a bit of money to push the needle. Well, where's that money going to come from? And if it's not going to come from institutional sources, and it looks like they're not going to do a Bitcoin strategic reserve with taxpayer money, they've stated, the Treasury Secretary has stated he's going to continue to confiscate Bitcoin through civil asset forfeiture. They're going to continue to steal Bitcoin from our friends. I mean, Ian Freeman has had, I don't even know, $5-10 million worth of his Bitcoin stolen. And when they raided him, before he, was even convicted or had his sentencing hearing, they confiscated all of his ledger drives and so forth. And I believe he actually had to sign a deal where, even if he loses or even if he wins, they still confiscated his crypto. Ross Ulbricht, who, received a pardon, and arguably, maybe he's entitled to that money, to those Bitcoin. He's certainly not going to get it, but that's the bulk of the 325,000 Bitcoin that the U.S. government has. There's another chunk of this, which was from a hack from a crypto exchange. Well, you might say, well, why don't they shouldn't they be giving the crypto, if there was a hack, wouldn't they give the Bitcoin back to the people that it was stolen from? And no, they just kept it. And so this leads to another point that a lot of people don't understand, which is that Bitcoin is not anonymous. So there are a lot of people that like to push this idea of, well, not my keys, not my coin. You can't physically, take my Bitcoin. This is one of the big features of it. The problem is that because it's all on an open ledger, and for the last 12 years, a company called Chainalysis has been working with exchanges and law enforcement all over the world to build a database tracking everybody's transactions. So it's pretty easy for them to find out. And once they find out one transaction, they can find out all of the other transactions. So if that's the case, so if they come to you and they say, hey, listen, we've got proof that this is yours, you can decide to not give up your keys, but they'll throw you in prison. And this is essentially what has happened. So the way they've ended up getting this cryptocurrency is by being able to say to defendants or whoever it happens to be, or whether people are guilty or not, we know these are yours. You're going to either give them to us or you're going to spend more time in jail. And so far, there aren't a lot of, brave souls that have said, well, I'm not going to give you my keys. And so a lot of people online will say, well, I would never give up my keys. The people whose crypto they've confiscated, these are really smart people. These are people that were ahead of the curve and were involved in Bitcoin like 15 years ago, and that, probably have IQs over 140. So there may be some guy out there that mined Bitcoin 15 years ago, has never done a transaction with anybody that can be traced. And so he can say, well, I've got, all of these things set up. They're not going to take my Bitcoin. That's irrelevant to the general proposition of whether Bitcoin can be tracked for normal users. So in any event, when you come back to this, it's okay, it can be tracked. The store value argument doesn't seem to be holding up, given that it's lost about 50% of its value. In order for the store value to work, a lot of money needs to come in. And because of the volatility in the Epstein thing, who is that going to be at this point? Who's going to want to risk doing this? What's the upside in taking that risk? Particularly in light of the fact that gold and silver have done better. So my statement to you, if you're sitting out there saying, well, it's going to go up in value and so on and so forth, based on what? Why would it? It hasn't really demonstrated that the hijacked use case is actually a viable one in times of economic turbulence. So I'll get into the article here. I mean, I've already gone through the big points, but as I go through the article, what I'll show you are the actual tweets. Not the tweets, the emails. That's the real fun part of this exercise. I will say before I get into that, I have done a ton of other interviews. I don't even have them all in here, but I encourage you to look at the episode that I did with Paul Barron called Crypto Clarity, Dead on Arrival. Why that one was really important to me is this guy has 2.2 million subscribers, and I've never been on his show before, don't know anybody in his audience, and the comments were overwhelmingly positive. And what that told me is most people out there sense that what they're being told on these crypto shows and podcasts about why we need this regulation, most people sense that it's BS, but they don't know why it's BS. And I just laid it all out. And so that's why that one is a good one. I was on with Meryl Nass of CHD TV. That was another great interview, and I'm grateful to have her support, particularly given her leadership and knowledge that's vast on a whole variety of different issues related to technocracy, globalization, food freedom, and so forth. And I have some podcasts. I can't say who they are with yet, but I have some really big podcasts coming up over the next week or two that are from people that I've never been on before, and we will reach a completely new audience. We're talking about, one of them is someone with 1 million followers, but is very much in the mainstream of what's going on. And we're going to be able to talk about these issues. This is, I want to say that if you watch my feed, what's happening now, and by the way, Bitcoin maxis have not wanted to debate me or have me on their shows at all. Roger, one of Roger's friends offered Adam back $500,000 to debate him on hijacking Bitcoin after the book came out, and Adam Back refused. I have been blocked by Max Kaiser, Michael Saylor, most of the Bitcoin core devs, so forth, the guy who wrote the Bitcoin standard, all of it. They have lists of people that they suppress. Part of their whole strategy has been, hey, we've got this new narrative. If we can just control the narrative, and we're the ones that are getting on TV, CNBC, and everything else, and we're building this big kind of cult around this, we'll just shut off the people that have the alternative opinion, or which is actually the truth, which at some level they know. Then maybe we'll keep the story going. Maybe we'll keep the pump alive. And now people want answers. So now all of a sudden these Bitcoin maxis are engaging. Now all of a sudden they're DMing me. Now I'm having, people say things like, oh, well, I'll debate anyone on this. Like this guy, Simon Dixon, and everything else. Here's my view on this. I certainly will not turn away a debate, but for the next 2 to 3 weeks, I'm not going to do any debates because I don't really care about Bitcoin maxis or the Bitcoin maxi community. First of all, it's small. Secondly, it operates like a religious cult. So the percentage chance that you're going to change somebody's mind is really small. Who needs to hear this message is the general public. And I'm saying this from my own experience, knowing that they're not, that from all the talks that I've done, and when I do talks, they're not with like average people. These are with people that are maybe recently awake, but generally intelligent people. They haven't heard of any of this. I want to go to those people. I don't want to waste my time in squabbles. I will do the debates, but it's not going to be for 2 to 3 weeks because we have a window here between the first Brownstone article, the next Brownstone article is going to go out, and all of these other interviews. We've got an opportunity to tell our side of the story. And I don't want to get bogged down in petty BS or to try to, frankly, salvage people's reputations, which may be irretrievable. If these people at this point, as you start to see what actually happened with this hijacking of Bitcoin and Epstein, if these people continue to try to do mental gymnastics to justify all of this stuff, then at some point at the end of it, when it all comes down, people will never trust those people again. Particularly if it then comes out during part of this process that they actually did know and actively suppressed it. That is going to be another big deal too. My goal, my job in life is not to protect the reputation of Bitcoin maxis who have been lying to people. So with that said, I'll do debates, but I mean, even if you're listening to this, because some of you tagged me and said you should do a debate with this, know that my position is I certainly will do a debate, but not for 2 to 3 weeks, because this is our opportunity to explain what's going on without the noise and the have fun staying poor and diamond hands and all of the cult behavior that goes on around it. This is the opportunity to frame this from the standpoint of the truth and the standpoint of the facts. This, by the way, this is part of the reason I'm doing this Technocracy Atlas, because I'm sick of these arguments where somebody said, well, this guy did this guy did this. How about this? How about we put all the evidence there, and then everybody can look at the evidence and can discuss the evidence and then contribute additional information. How about we actually focus on the truth and putting out primary source information? So that's kind of the thing on that. So if you see me, so just understand my position is going to be 2 to 3 weeks. We'll do some debates. Now, in addition to the interviews I have lined up, I'm going to be traveling. So this is another part of it as well. I'm going to be traveling for the next 2 weeks. So I'm going to be in Mexico next Thursday at Moneratopia. So I'll be at Moneratopia next week. And then the following week, I'll be at Anarchapulco and at the Crypto Vigilante Summit. Now, I'm looking forward to both of these. And I actually think the timing is great for both of these events because, I've been to Moneratopia. And most of the people at Moneratopia, it's Moneratopia. This is a privacy coin focused conference. But I remember being there 15 months ago. The last time they had it was in November, and I remember being at a table debating with people. I had made the connection that I thought Epstein was involved in it, and people were trying to say, well, no, he wasn't, and they were trying to frame it as a conspiracy theory. Well, I've got news for them, and I know some of those people are still going to be there. It is no longer a conspiracy theory. So for me, it's going to be very interesting to see if you're not willing to change your position in light of new information, then that's really interesting knowledge, right? And there's a certain degree to which you can't spend time on those people. You just have to move on and have a different conversation. A lot of what happens is, I'll say something like, hey, Pete, you should read Hijacking Bitcoin or whatever. And then somebody will say, well, Roger was wrong, or Roger's just doing this so he can promote Bitcoin Cash. Roger, the last time I saw Roger do an interview was on Tucker Carlson, and he was talking about Zano and Confidential Layer. Roger has been about what got me into crypto was his speech about peer-to-peer digital cash and what it means for economic freedom and for getting rid of the violence and everything that comes about when people have central banks in these debt-based systems. That is what Roger has been about. I've seen it. I've watched him. I mean, I don't know him that well personally, but I have followed what he has been doing. He's got a body of work, and it's impressive. And so I'll debate with people, and they're like, well, this is just about Bcash or whatever. And it's like, and so most of the people's complaints are like, well, you held this different position on this thing at some point in time. It's like, well, no, the mission's always been peer-to-peer digital cash. You experiment with things. That markets are about experimentation and trying new things. Some of them work, some of them don't. You test a lot of things, you learn, and you move on. That's how it works. And a lot of people are like, well, wait, you tried this one thing 16 years ago and it got hijacked, and you're not sticking with that. Well, what's wrong with you? Well, it got hijacked. It's not doing the thing that it was supposed to do. Why would you? So anyway, Anarchapulco will be another good event. And as I think about it, when I was at Moneratopia last, Ross Ulbricht was still in prison, and Roger was in Spain. And so sometimes when I was reflecting on even what my talk was going to be about, sometimes it seems like there's not a lot going on. And then, but in reality, there's a lot going on. And when you can do a bit of a look back, even 6 months or 12 months, there are some good things happening. After that, I'm going to be in Portugal at the Parallel Society Conference, which should be really interesting as well. That's in Lisbon. So if I know some people have reached out to me because they've heard me talk about this in this podcast. So I know there are some of you that are actually going to be able to attend some of these events. So it'll be great to see some of you in person. And then lastly, we have the Libertarian National Convention, May the 21st through the 25th. And so there's going to be a whole crypto corner there right off of the main area for the convention. And so, I'm going to be there talking about the Daylight projects and OSR and the Technocracy Atlas and all the things that we're doing. And Zano is going to be there. Confidential Layer is going to be there. And so excited about that, because obviously this is a big event drawing libertarians from around the country. So, all right, we'll get into it. What I'm going to do, I have these slides, but I don't even think I'm just going to pull up the actual article because I don't think the slides are necessarily all that meaningful in this respect. So bear with me here 1 second. Oh, and by the way, I'm wearing these glasses, and I've talked to you guys about Jack Cruz. Jack Cruz has now put out 2 posts calling me a retard. And this is part of the point of this. So these are a lot of Bitcoin maxis that won't engage previously, and now they're doing name calling. He didn't like a post that I did about the guy who wrote the Bitcoin Standard. He didn't dispute any of the facts, but he just went to name calling. And so, look, I still respect the work that he's done on light and mitochondria and health, but I think he's dead wrong on Bitcoin. Absolutely dead wrong on Bitcoin. And I'm even questioning and looking into when did he even get involved in Bitcoin, because he didn't even start talking about this until like 2020. He claims he got involved in 2011. I have no idea if that's true. I have no idea. I did an entire podcast based on a theory that he had. And his theory was that Meyer Lansky was basically doing the money laundering for the Jewish mafia, involved with a lot of the casinos and everything else. And it's kind of a more elaborate story. And they learned about how the Federal Reserve was hijacked and ended up having a lot of leverage with, FDR's administration, other administrations, so on and so forth. And his claim was that, they were instrumental at working with a guy named Dave Chaum to create a cryptocurrency before Bitcoin. And that project failed, but that this guy, Len Sassaman, who he claims is Satoshi, kind of gave the big middle finger to both the mafia and the CIA and created Bitcoin as something that couldn't be controlled by either of those groups. I mean, look, it's a great sounding story. The problem is he can't prove any of these points. He can't prove Lansky's involvement with Dave Chum, and he can't prove that Sassaman is Satoshi. And I asked him about it. I'm not saying that what he's saying is wrong, but it's kind of like, I suspected that Epstein funded this because at least there was a track of he gave money to the MIT group that did fund these things. I didn't even realize it was as direct as here's an email that says, here are the developers that this is funding. But he has no evidence of this. But his conclusion is because he's made this construction that is not provable, that Len Sassaman is Satoshi, and because based on his view of this, Sassaman developed Bitcoin in such a way that it couldn't be controlled by the CIA or the mafia, that it is the end-all be-all and therefore is the only digital currency. Well, I will tell you, his story could be completely true. Those could be the players, but the design of Bitcoin could still be flawed. It's still not privacy by default. He may have been able to develop this outside of the control, even if what he says is true and Sassaman developed this outside of the control of those organizations, it's still flawed. It still doesn't function in its hijacked form as digital gold or peer-to-peer cash. In its current form, it doesn't work. So he's holding on to, and he's calling everybody, are you a savage? If you haven't heard what Uncle Jack said, Uncle Jack, your shit can't be proven. So my position on this is we're going to, if you can't prove it, it didn't happen, but I don't even need you to prove it. I don't need you to prove who Satoshi was to tell you why Bitcoin isn't working as a store of value. So expect a lot of spice, but a lot of this cult stuff where it's like, well, because he said this, he doesn't have any proof of it. And when I did my podcast on this, I wasn't adversarial. In fact, I wasn't even adversarial with him when I was posting. I actually just challenged him to find the fault in the information that I put out, and he refused. He decided to call me a retard instead. And now other people are calling in and say, "Oh, this guy, what does he know? He's not a savage or whatever." And it's ridiculous behavior. And frankly, I wonder maybe this guy's a psyop, because one of the things that you do if you're trying to deflect people is you tell them something that's 80% true, where it seems feasible, and then the other 20% is either unknowable or maybe he knows and maybe it's true and maybe it's not. And now you have a whole cult of people that are buying what he's saying about this. We have to call all of that out. And I'm actually encouraging all of you to do this. This is the time where we focus on the truth and on information. And I don't care what people push back on, if it's going to be name calling or trying to most of these people are like, oh, you've probably never coded anything. You're probably just a no coiner. I was involved with Bitcoin before probably 95% of. They have no idea even what they're talking about. But and you don't have to engage in every fight that's out there. But these maxis have dominated the landscape and the framework on all of this the entire time. They censored people from Reddit, and they engage in all of these various activities, which we now know are even more kind of ominous with Epstein connections and everything else. And so there's no reason to put up with any of this, and there's no reason to stay quiet. And frankly, the fact that people like Roger can't speak, so that means we all need to, more people should read Hijacking Bitcoin, and then more people should be talking about hijacking Bitcoin. Share the knowledge that you learn, because our A team, the people that know the most about this, that were there, that have been fighting for this the whole time, they're still either suppressed or they're in prison still. And that should be enough that people should be, Roger Ver was completely vindicated this week. So anyway, with that said, let me see if how the screen is going here. All right, good. We've got the article up. So the article is on Brownstone. It's called The Hijacking of Bitcoin. And I'm sure I've probably already talked about all of this. Again, Bitcoin was supposed to be digital cash. And then it was hijacked. And what we learned is there was this fight over the block size. And again, I encourage you to read Roger's book, Hijacking Bitcoin. And, Roger argues that the original vision was deliberately buried so that Bitcoin could turn into something easier for the big institutions to control. And most of Hijacking Bitcoin, it talks about quite a bit of detail. And the thing about the book is that the references, it's not like Roger just like telling a story. Most of the information there is the evidence sources are the actual people that engaged in the hijacking in their own words, from emails, from discussion boards, from threads. It's not Roger narrating a story. So for instance, if somebody says, well, the reason, if you want to look at the mechanics of how did they end up with small blocks and how did they end up with a system where if you wanted to get your transaction done with these artificially small blocks, you'd have a system where you would kind of bid, called replace by fee. He shows the documentation with messages from a guy named John Dillon, who was tied to the intelligence community, paying one of the developers, Peter Todd, to make one of those changes. That's an example of the kind of thing that's in this book. And he has a discussion in there of who some of the people are that were involved in Blockstream and who and what that was all about. You had some Bitcoin core developers that formed a for-profit company that had these investors that were tied to traditional finance, and their entire business model was based on generating fees that would only be possible by basically handicapping Bitcoin and making it so it could only do 7 transactions per second. All of that is meticulously documented, and in fact, no one's refuted it. I got blocked from a lot of people just for writing a small, like 1-paragraph thing saying you should read the book, and then Roger retweeted it, and then a bunch of people just blocked me. Nobody even engaged with me on it. So one of the things that Roger talks about is in the process of the block size wars, there was complete suppression of any opposing views to the small blockers, literally kicking people off of Reddit, which was the main channel where people would discuss these things. And Roger didn't start Bitcoin Cash. Roger was originally not sure which way he was going to go. And what Roger knows, which I think we all now know at this point, because this is kind of a universal thing, the people who are censored are usually the people who are right. And so I think there was just kind of an instinctual thing. Well, hey, maybe I should look into this, right? It probably piqued his curiosity. And then my book and some of the subsequent articles extended kind of what he was doing. And I threw in this Epstein angle. And where the Epstein angle came in was when I saw that the same MIT group that had taken over funding the developers also worked on all 3 US CBDC pilots. So my kind of position on this was, what's going on with CBDCs? How far advanced are they? And it turns out that it's the same story. It's the same players. And I didn't know that at first. And so now it's become like, wow, now we're just talk about being able to put all of the different pieces together. And so as I'm going through the article here, so Jeffrey Epstein gave MIT $850,000 over the years, including $525,000 to the Digital Currency Initiative. So where that piqued my interest is the Digital Currency Initiative within MIT worked on 3 CBDC pilots. Project Hamilton, which is the retail CBDC. It's basically the digital dollar. It's what would replace cash. Project Cedar, which is what's called a wholesale CBDC. This is for banks to do large volume with each other. It's used for, cross-border transactions. And then this thing, and this is what really took me aback, which is called Regulated Liability Network. And this was a pilot between MIT and a bunch of, and the New York Fed and a whole bunch of other financial institutions to basically to create a platform for tokenizing all of our assets and making it so that all of those assets can only be settled using CBDCs, but it connects all of the central banks and all of the CBDCs globally. All of that came out of this MIT group. All of that came out of the Digital Currency Initiative. But it turns out, so kind of the story here is you have, and I'll take a step back. I'll have to do another podcast just about Brock Pierce. Again, I have done one on him, but there's like massive amounts of information. And in fact, I probably should put it on Technocracy Atlas. I first learned about Brock Pierce when I started my first company and I was taking my company public, and I had engaged an investment bank called Lazard Frere to do the IPO. And we were going to be the second IPO that they did, internet IPO. This is a prestigious investment bank. They had this other company in front of us called DEN, Digital Entertainment Network. And I didn't know who he was at the time. I didn't actually know any of the backstory, but the CEO of that company was Brock Pierce. Well, my company didn't end up going public because Brock's company ended up involved in a scandal involving sex trafficking, the founder in allegations and things involving boys and so on and so forth. And so like the founders and people had to leave the country and go to Spain. Their IPO was pulled. It tainted the reputation of the investment bank. And then they didn't do our IPO. And so our IPO was shelved and we missed the entire window. This probably cost me $20 or $50 million. Like this is not, and I didn't know at the time who Brock Pierce was, but I knew, I'm like, God, what the hell? Because honestly, these kinds of sex scandals, this is like the late 90s, early 2000. Like that wasn't as popular a thing, I guess, as popular as it's become now. So it was a pretty big deal at the time. And I didn't even associate the name with it. And so Brock Pierce goes from that, somehow ends up getting involved as the CEO of some gaming company that Steve Bannon ends up becoming the CEO of, by the way, after Brock was the CEO of it. And some of this timing becomes really interesting. And then it turns out that Brock, I don't even know if this is the first time he met him, but was at a conference, not on Epstein's island, but on a different island in 2011 with Epstein. And at that point, he seems to begin to start advising Jeffrey Epstein on crypto matters. So understand this. So he effectively starts becoming his crypto advisor, becomes Jeffrey Epstein's crypto advisor after Epstein had already been convicted. And now all of a sudden, Brock Pierce is in here advising him on this. And I haven't even gone through all of the emails. But when I say advise, I'm not even talking about like, there are one or two emails back and forth. I mean, there's stuff with, and I don't even want to go into this stuff, but there's like a post with a whole bunch of pictures of Ukrainian girls and back and like there is some of that stuff that's part of it. And I don't even want to dwell on that. What I want to focus on are things like what we found. Well, this is the most important one, which is this is the email from Jeffrey Epstein to Joy Ito, who's the head of the MIT group. And he says, Gavin is clever. Joy says, used gift funds to underwrite this, which allowed us to move quickly and win this round. Thanks. Okay, well, what is it that the money was earmarked for? All right, here we go. The way that Bitcoin is organized currently is that there are 5 core developers and around 100 contributors to the core code. The 5 core developers are like Linus Torvalds of Linux. They decide what changes are made. One of the 5 is lead developer Vladimir, and one is chief scientist Gavin. So Gavin, Vladimir, and Corey, an important contributing developer, were being paid out of a nonprofit organization called the Bitcoin Foundation. A few weeks ago, it blew up when one of the board members declared the foundation bankrupt. And so many organizations scrambled to step in the vacuum created by the foundation and take control of the developers. We moved quickly, talking to all the various stakeholders, and the 3 developers decided to join the Media Lab. This is a big win for us. All right, now so here's some interesting information for you. So we know that Brock Pierce is essentially Epstein's crypto advisor. Brock Pierce was the chairman of the Bitcoin Foundation when this happened. So Brock Pierce is the one kind of driving this train. Now, you may have noticed there's some, you have Bruce Fenton, who I know and, have been friendly with, and, he had the Project Ravencoin and everything else. Bruce Fenton was the executive director of the Bitcoin Foundation. So you'll see him. The one thing that I have noticed is he'll try to dispel this. The first time that I talked about this and tried to make these connections, he said it was a conspiracy theory. Then when this email came out, he said, well, this is old news. I guarantee you it's not old news to 99.99% of the people on the planet. But now he's out doing more damage control. But the one thing that he never says when he's doing the damage control is that he was the executive director while all this was happening. So I point that out to you because you might want to ask him about that. I find that to be very interesting. So Epstein's funding was earmarked for and used to fund these three developers. Now, what did these three developers end up working on? They ended up working on SegWit. They ended up working on Lightning Network. Now, but I want to say something in terms of timing, and I don't know if I have that email in here. Let me see if this one's in here. There's so much to put together. Oh, I do have the email. All right, so this email that I just described is from April the 25th, 2015. Now we're going to go to this other email. This email is from before that time. This email is from July the 15th, 2014. So this email is like, what, 8 months earlier. So this is an email between Jeffrey Epstein, or it's to Jeffrey Epstein and Joy Ito. And then whatever, some other things, I guess these are the email addresses. From a guy named Austin Hill. Austin Hill is one of the founders of Blockstream, and carbon copied on this are Hammy Hill, which I believe is the CFO of Blockstream, and Adam Back. Okay, so Adam Back, I believe, was the CEO of Blockstream at this time. So this is 8 months before Epstein's money is earmarked to fund the Bitcoin developers to work on Lightning Network and SegWit, essentially permanently crippling it for this digital gold narrative to, and then this idea of, okay, well, then we'll build these second layer solutions. But 8 months before that, there's this email that says, hey, Joy and Jeffrey, we are down to the wire on closing this round. We are 10 times oversubscribed on an 18 million seed round, and Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn at the last minute told us to bump your allocation from 50,000 to 500,000. This is causing no small amount of headaches, but Blank and I respect you both and have learned so much from you in our discussions. We have everyone else make a haircut to make room. So in this email, 8 months before MIT takes over the devs, cementing the absolute crippling of the L1, they invested $500,000 in Blockstream. And remember, Blockstream is that second layer company, that makes its profit off of transactions on this second layer. So we did not know the timetable and the level to which this was involved, but Epstein actually had a financial interest himself that then benefited from him taking over and controlling the devs. But it gets even more interesting than this. So we mentioned who the three devs are: Gavin, Vladimir, and Corey. Corey is a guy by the name of Corey Fields. Corey ends up moving, I don't know if he moved away from or was doing this at the same time. Corey became one of the co-authors of Project Hamilton. So he was actually he was a main developer of the retail CBDC project, the collaboration between MIT and the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. So what does this mean? So there are people out there that were saying, well, the right side won, and we needed to do this so that ultimately this Lightning Network would be what would be used to do peer-to-peer cash, and that would be the ultimate solution. But in reality, I think they knew it wasn't going to work intentionally, and they actually peeled the developer off and had him work on a CBDC project. The CBDC project, Project Hamilton, does 1.8 million transactions per second. So Bitcoin, they stuck Bitcoin at 7 transactions per second, and then successfully developed a CBDC that does 1.8 million transactions per second. So this is actually how interconnected this is. And there are even, it doesn't even stop here. I'm not going to go, I need more visuals to actually kind of map all of the rest of this out. There's something, and I made this insight. I don't usually go here, right? You will not hear me talking about the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers. And it's not for any particular reason other than, actually, I think there's been enough propaganda that if you're talking about that, then you're either anti-Semitic or there's some other thing you get kind of labeled in this category, or you're way off tinfoil hat, right? And so I wouldn't normally talk about it at all. I've never talked about it. Well, in this instance, we found in some of the other emails, Jeffrey Epstein was actually managing money for the Rothschild family. He was paid $25 million to manage tech investments on behalf of the Rothschild family. So there's an email between Epstein and Peter Thiel where he says, as you may or may not know, I manage money for the Rothschild family. This is why when I said in the introduction, the most interesting thing about these files isn't the sex trafficking. It's who is Epstein a front for and what is the actual agenda. Now, this I'm going to state, as I state this is completely a theory, but there's something really interesting that I've noticed about this. When you read other emails, Jeffrey Epstein mostly just was involved in short-term trading of Bitcoin. He didn't actually hodl. So to the extent that he actually, the one interview he did on this topic, he said Bitcoin was a store of value and it not to be used as a currency. And despite the fact that he funded making it so that Bitcoin was a store of value and couldn't be used as peer-to-peer cash, he didn't actually hodl. So that's kind of interesting. I mean, that speaks to me directly of the idea of hijacking, right? So it's like, well, yeah, this is a store of value. I'm just not going to store value here. All I'm going to do is do a little bit of short-term trading on this. I find that to be interesting. And the real big conspiracy part of this, so there are some people that speculate that the Rothschilds own, some people claim they own all of the central banks. That's clearly not true in a lot of different instances, but it's conceivable that they do have a position, but it's kind of like, as I was describing earlier, Epstein's name isn't on here. MIT went out of their way to hide Epstein's involvement. So you're not going to see, thank you to Jeffrey Epstein for funding the digital currency group. When Epstein invested in Coinbase, he didn't invest in his own name. He invested through Brock Pierce's company. So it's conceivable that the Rothschilds actually do own, through other entities and other relationships, banks that own chunks of these central banks. We wouldn't know or be able to calculate what effect that is. But I will tell you, if that did turn out to be the case, if the Rothschilds do own through their ownership of, through various entities, the banks that make up the Federal Reserve, they would directly benefit from Bitcoin being hobbled. And they would directly benefit from Project Hamilton, because Project Hamilton is a direct retail CBDC. So I'm throwing that out there and I'm flagging it, and I'm saying that part of it is a conspiracy. Everything else I've talked about is documented fact through this. But this is why I'm saying this story keeps on getting worse. I mean, when I talked about it, when I wrote my original article about this a couple of years ago, it wasn't like this bad. It wasn't this incestuous. It wasn't he's profiting off of Blockstream. He invested in Blockstream, and then they engineered taking over the development. And it just so happens that the person that was the chair of the Bitcoin Foundation when it failed happens to be the guy that's advising Jeffrey Epstein on all crypto matters, right? We did not know all of that. We did not know Brock Pierce's involvement in a whole bunch of things. And as I said, I'm trying to prioritize my time. So I want to focus, because it's particularly relevant now, on the hijacking of Bitcoin as it relates to the context of CBDCs, but it also relates to Tether. So we'll get to that. So this is kind of the documented proof here. So we know Epstein is in Blockstream. We know Epstein funded the Bitcoin Core developers. We know one of the Bitcoin Core developers went on to be the co-author of the U.S. retail CBDC white paper. Now, we have Brock Pierce in this, and we know that Brock Pierce personally brokered Epstein's $3 million investment in Coinbase in late 2014. So remember this. So even when I was studying this earlier, like I could dig up that, Epstein made one comment in 2017 about this, but there was no outward evidence that, for all we know, it's possible that Epstein, just became interested recently in digital currencies and made this general check to MIT, kind of as a way to start learning about cryptocurrency. Now we know he's been involved in it since 2011. I mean, Coinbase, think about that. He was an investor in Coinbase 12 years ago. $3 million he invested. And here's the email from Brock Pierce to Jeffrey Epstein. So the email down here is, okay, Fred is in New York today. I need to get back to them ASAP to let them know if I'm just participating for the smaller amount. If you aren't interested, can you talk? Epstein writes, take 3 million. Done. We'll follow up shortly. So there you have it. And this broke, I think, just 2 days ago. So keep in mind, normally you might be like, well, why does that even matter? Well, it matters when it turns out that the largest lobbyist, the largest organization lobbying for the Genius Act and the Clarity Act is Coinbase. So if you want to see how all of this stuff fits together, and it goes on and on. Like I said, I'm still trying to process all the documents. I'm literally right now downloading other sets of documents so that I can get all 3.5 million pages into the system. So I haven't even been able to search for, I have no idea what we're going to find. Like, we haven't even scratched part of the surface of all of this. And I've been floored. I mean, I have some other theories that maybe I'll share. And again, when I do this, I want to tell you which ones are theories and which ones aren't. But there's been some stuff kind of nagging at me for a long time about Steve Bannon and some other people as it relates to crypto and some of the other things that I've talked about, which I'll get to later. But it some of the other things that came out of the emails, Pierce sat down with former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, and described himself at that meeting at Epstein's mansion as the most active investor in Bitcoin. Summers saw potential, but worried aloud about getting involved could destroy his reputation because of Bitcoin's wild price swings. Pierce even told Summers, you're going to have some low quality characters playing early in the space. Yeah, Pierce is saying this. I mean, this is rich. We got Pierce and Epstein talking about low quality characters. I'd be really interested to find out who it is they think are low quality characters, by the way, because there may be a whole new level of hell that we're unfamiliar with here. So Pierce kept a relationship going, tons of emails back and forth, emailing casually about getting others involved in Tether. In fact, he had emailed Epstein about trying to have Epstein help him get Summers involved in Tether. Now, I want to remind you of this. Brock Pierce was a co-founder of Tether. Now, I don't have any evidence of this yet, but I think it's really possible, if not probable, that through some investment vehicle, possibly Brock, that Epstein is an early investor in Tether. In fact, I think that that's likely. They're doing all of these deals together, and then Brock goes and starts something called Tether that's a currency, and then he's emailing Epstein about it, and Epstein's not going to be an investor? It would actually be unlikely that Epstein is not an investor, and there are emails going back to 2014 with Pierce and Epstein talking about Tether. The one I've been able to find so far involves trying to get Larry Summers involved. So Pierce is the bridge. He's even kind of referred to as his elf or something like that in one of the email exchanges. I think Epstein referred to him as that. So literally the relationship here isn't, well, we just did some emails back and forth. Literally Brock Pierce was, when you think about you have Brock Pierce as a front with all his background and baggage for Jeffrey Epstein, who's a front for the Rothschilds. This is literally what's going on here. I mean, I would never have even contemplated that kind of a whack job conspiracy theory. And yet here we are. So then we get into Tether. And I had speculated, I did an interview with the Daily Mail a while ago. And, I've been asking myself, how did Howard Lutnick get involved in Tether? There are a couple of interesting things about Howard Lutnick, which is that you never heard about him in cryptocurrency, and you also never heard about him in Republican politics. So then just all of a sudden, he comes in and he's out of nowhere, he's doing a $600 million investment into Tether in exchange for getting the exclusive contract to manage all of the treasuries. And then all of a sudden, not being politically active, he's the chair of Trump's transition team involved with the selection of all the cabinet members. Like that's a little bit weird. So I've always thought that I've not assumed. My suspicion is that Brock Pierce is the one that put all of this together. I still don't have like the definitive email on this, but I think certainly some things make that look more probable now than when I was thinking about it a couple of weeks ago. And one is that Howard Lutnick claims that he cut ties with Epstein after 2006. Okay, this is one of the things I think maybe even as he was going through his confirmation process for Commerce Secretary or so forth, he said no, he was disgusted. He did one of these. Oh yeah, I distanced myself from this in 2006. Well, now we have emails that show he was planning a family trip to Epstein's Island in 2012. We have that email. We also have an email where Epstein donated $50,000 to an event Lutnick hosted in 2017. Now, we also know that Lutnick was a next door neighbor. He was a next door neighbor of Epstein, and he actually bought his house from Epstein. So, like we originally had like those pieces of information, but I mean, it's conceivable somebody could purchase some real estate or whatever. It doesn't mean that they're involved in anything. It doesn't mean that there's any intersection in crypto and everything else, but he blatantly lied about this. And so here's the here's the email from Howard Lutnick to presumably to Epstein. By the way, the redactions on this are weird. They redact things where it's like, well, clearly who it's to. He's saying who it's to, but then you block out the name in the field. I actually saw somebody said something that was pretty interesting, which is they clearly redacted the word "don't," and the takeaway they had from that was, why would you do that? And then they said, oh wait, Don. So maybe they just went through and redacted anything to try to like cover up Trump's name, perhaps in some of these documents, or it's just incompetence. I mean, who knows? I don't even know what. I can only imagine what their process was for redacting 3.5 million pages. But let me see if I can expand. The font's a little small here on this email. All right. Hi, Jeff. We're landing in St. Thomas early Saturday afternoon. I'm planning to head over to St. Bart's on Monday at some point. Where are you located? What's the exact location for my captain? Does Sunday evening for dinner sound good? I have another couple, Michael and Marcy Learman, with me on my boat, and each of us have 4 children. And it goes on and lists their ages. Thanks, Howard. So I mean, again, Howard Lutnick flat out lied. I mean, so at a minimum, we know he lied about having a relationship. He lied about cutting off ties. He even received money from Epstein. And so I suspect there's more there. Again, this is what we have, but I'm trying to process through all of these documents and put all of the documents into kind of an email viewer, just like Gmail. But we're going to have actually more information than Gmail so that we can see all of this. But we've demonstrated that there's a relationship between Epstein and Lutnick, and we know that Pierce is essentially Epstein's crypto advisor. So I'm going to make my theory is that Pierce is directly involved in this. My theory is that I suspect that somehow through some vehicle, possibly through Pierce, because that's what they did with Coinbase, I'm going to suggest to you that Epstein is an owner of some part in Tether, and that the whole connection with Lutnick happened through Brock Pierce. In fact, it might have been that Epstein introduced Pierce to Howard Lutnick. That's probably more likely the case, right? Think of it. So Pierce is advising, just like Pierce went to Epstein trying to get Larry Summers. It's very conceivable that Pierce went to Epstein to get access to Lutnick, or Lutnick, after having a conversation with Epstein, was introduced to Pierce. Maybe not, but man, I'll tell you, when you see the rest of it, it certainly makes a lot of sense. And so now here's the key part of this that I want to express that I think is really important from a timing perspective. Epstein invested in Blockstream in July of 14. Then the destruction of the Bitcoin Foundation happens while Pierce is in charge, and Epstein ends up funding the Bitcoin developers who solidify Bitcoin as being digital gold instead of digital cash. Now, if your new model that came out of nowhere, as I talked about in the interview with Jeffrey's like, he's got people calling him all of a sudden. It's kind of like, no, we're not doing digital cash now. It's digital gold, right? New narrative, kind of out of the blue. There are like new talking points. It was clearly a contrived, this was not an organic process to kind of push this narrative. Well, if you are going to be a store of value, then you need to have something that actually preserves value or goes up in value. So now we're in the 2017 time period. So this is where what we found was there's a 2018 University of Texas study done by John M. Griffin and Eamon Shams that showed Tether tokens getting minted right after Bitcoin price drops in 2017, followed by massive BTC pumps. They calculated that Tether purchases accounted for roughly 50% of Bitcoin's entire price run-up and up to 64% for other top coins. Less than 1% of the hours with big Tether flows explained half the Bitcoin gains that year. So, I mean, they made the narrative, they hobbled the coin, and then they artificially pumped the price to make people believe that it was a store of value. This is what I'm suggesting is the narrative here. And so what I'm suggesting is that the whole Bitcoin store of value thing is fake. It's completely fake. And then it turned into kind of like a fake it until you make it. Now, remember, the important part about all of this is Tether has still not passed an audit. So at this point, when they're doing this, these are likely coins that are not backed one-to-one. They were found in two instances, once with the CFTC. In 2021, the CFTC fined Tether and Bitfinex a total of $42.5 million. $41 million for Tether, $1.5 million for Bitfinex, which is an exchange, a Bitcoin exchange or a crypto exchange, and they actually have a common investor. iFinex is an investor in Tether and Bitfinex. I'd love to see who the shareholders are in that, by the way. They were fined $42.5 million for lying about reserves. The CFTC found that from June the 16th to February 2019, Tether falsely claimed that every USDT was backed one-to-one by dollars. In reality, it was fully backed only 27.6% of the time over a 26-month period. They also hid that reserves included unsecured loans and other non-cash junk. Tether settled without admitting or denying, but the numbers are on record. So no one's disputing the fact that during this time period, when this pump happened, that they didn't have the reserves, and there are all these shady practices, including hiding reserves. And I've dug more into this. They would do things like, by the way, Tether's still doing this to this day. They still haven't passed an audit. What they do is something called an attestation. So rather than have a situation where they analyze all of your financial statements, all of your profit and loss, balance sheet, all of the transactions and everything, and see exactly what happened over time, inflows, outflows, to make sure that everything is legit, it's kind of like taking a snapshot of your bank account, your check account, in one day to see if you have enough funds. Well, there's another document that I read that suggests, or article that I read that suggests that this crypto exchange Bitfinex would wire money to Tether for the attestation, and like a day or two later, the money would get wired back out to Bitfinex. So, I mean, I had an interesting conversation with somebody today, an email, somebody who read the article. And so I want to be clear. Fiat is a Ponzi, right? They print that out of thin air backed by debt. This is essentially like a meta level of that. So you're claiming that your thing is backed by this thing that's a Ponzi, and then your thing isn't even backed by that. And that is what was used to pump the price of Bitcoin. They've parlayed this whole thing now into Lutnick backing the treasuries. Now, and remember how kind of evil this is, right? So up until the Genius Act, if you had a stable coin, even if you were making the claims that you were backed 1-to-1, you didn't have to back your stable coin with dollars or treasuries. You could have used gold or Bitcoin or silver or real estate or whatever, right? But just so long as the assets that you had backing your token were sufficient that, you know, somebody could redeem it for a dollar's worth of value. Lutnick came in and made an investment that said, well, we want to manage your treasuries, which of course the treasuries probably, for a company that hasn't been able to do an audit and has been found to not have reserves, they probably didn't have a huge amount of treasuries. So he goes in and cuts that deal and then gets involved in politics. And then they bring in this guy, Bo Hines, to be the crypto advisor for Trump to draft the Genius Act. And then the Genius Act, part of the Genius Act says, if you're going to be a legal, legitimate stablecoin issuer, you now have to back your stablecoin only with treasuries. This makes Howard Lutnick the single biggest beneficiary in his firm, Cantor Fitzgerald, of the Genius Act. And lo and behold, here we are. It's February, and USAT, which is the official symbol for Tether's new official stablecoin, is now live. So that he went from the investment to getting involved with the administration to getting somebody involved to craft the policy to getting the law passed to the advisor that helped him passing it becoming the CEO of Tether America. And they've still never passed an audit. So I'm trying to express, and I'll try to work my way through to get even simpler language on this, but are you sensing how big of a scam this is? Digital gold was a made-up thing, pumped with fake money, and then now this has turned into government regulation. And I, before the election, I'm not going to say who the people are now or yet, but I was talking to people that have the ear of Trump at a high level. And this is before the Genius Act. This is before I knew about Lutnick. I was trying to warn people, and I said this on the show even before the election. I thought Tether was kind of going to be potentially this too big to fail disaster because Tether wasn't just used to pump Bitcoin. Tether was used to pump a lot of other cryptos. And in fact, I think that if you look at, and I'm going to be careful, these are my opinions, but these centralized exchanges aren't regulated. But on top of that, you have, Binance has a stable coin. There are all these other stable coins. How much of the overall volume of all crypto is fake? How many fake stable coins are there? And how, and you may have situations where people are wash trading, where they're printing fake stable coins, and then they're just trading the same coins back and forth to pump up the volume and to pump up the price artificially and to make it look like that there's more demand and more interest. I mean, I think it's conceivable that there's just huge taint across the board. But the problem is that now Tether is literally positioned itself to be too big to fail. This is the thing that I worried about the most, right? Because as I explained it to you, this is so bad. This is such a corrupt situation that no one will ever want to take responsibility for this. Because with Tether, I haven't even checked how many, we're $33 trillion a year now in stablecoin volume, and they're the largest player, so on and so forth. No one's going to want to admit that they allowed this to happen. They will cover this up before they allow it to happen. And as I have suggested, this new Fed chair that we have, Warsh, his role previously was to bail out the banks during 2008. So now we come full circle. Bitcoin was created, or at least we thought was created, as an answer to the 2008 financial crisis, as an answer to the bailout. And now where we are is Bitcoin was hijacked from being the antidote to that to now being something that is a fake store of value, while the same people involved have created something that's worse than fiat itself, a digital token that can be programmed, tracked, and censored that's backed by treasuries. This is a hijacking of crypto. This isn't even just a hijacking of Bitcoin. This is much larger. And this will continue to get much larger. I don't have necessarily a lot of time to, investigate all of these things. I'm focused on the main aspect of this. I'm trying to find out the most relevant parts as it relates to technocracy and as it relates to losing our ownership of money and assets and our ability to engage in voluntary trade. So I'm going to continue to investigate the biggest issues around this. But I mean, honestly, I'd love to get your comments and feedback on this, but are you seeing how big of a scandal this is? I mean, I would frame this as, I don't know if I did this in this article or not. Yeah, I did. So I'll actually just read this because I thought it was a pretty good synopsis of this. So the end game, genius, clarity, and the Bitcoin reserve. So this is the full circle. Epstein funded the MIT devs who killed Bitcoin as cash. Brock Pierce ran the Bitcoin Foundation into the ground, opened the door for Epstein's money, brokered Epstein's Coinbase stake, sat in Epstein's mansion pitching Bitcoin to Larry Summers, co-founded Tether, and kept emailing Epstein until 2018. Tether then printed unbacked dollars to pump Bitcoin 50% in 2017. Howard Lutnick, who lied about cutting ties with Epstein, took over management of Tether's $130+ billion treasury reserves before he even joined the Trump transition team. He pushed for Treasury Secretary, missed, landed at Commerce, installed his ally Bo Hines as White House crypto advisor, had Hines ram through the Genius Act, then watched Hines quit the White House and immediately become the CEO of Tether's U.S. subsidiary. Every single player is connected. Every single move is coordinated. The Genius Act entrenches the exact loopholes Tether has lived on. The Clarity Act handles regulatory control over to the same insiders. The Bitcoin Strategic Reserve sits on top of a coin whose price was artificially inflated by the same stablecoin they now regulate, whose core development was funded by Epstein, and whose usability was deliberately destroyed by the people who profit from the fix. This is not Big Short 2.0. This is Big Short 2.0 on steroids, pre-planned and run by the same network that already owns the outcome. They created the crisis, crippled on-chain Bitcoin, printed the fake money to pump it, Tether, positioned themselves to own the solution, Blockstream, Cantor, USAT, wrote the laws that protect their scam, Genius, Clarity, and are now preparing to step in as the saviors when the bubble they inflated finally pops. They walk away with fees, stakes, revolving door jobs, and permanent control over programmable money. We get every transaction tracked, this is us, every dollar programmable, and the last remnants of financial freedom erased under the banner of innovation and stability. This is not incompetence, this is conquest. I mean, this is what's going on. So when I talk about, almost no one talks about tokenization. I've been writing articles, I've been talking about tokenization for 7 or 8 years because tokenization is the gateway to the complete digital prison, because it's the tokenization of everything, not just money. This is why Zano is important. This is why Zano is critical. This is why privacy coins are critical, because the only way out of this system, which is complete tracking, by the way, even today, they're still pushing. They delayed the Clarity Act, but once again, Cynthia Loomis is on there, and I think she made some quote. She was talking to Besant in some hearing or whatever, and she said, well, we need this bill. America needs this bill to move forward. And if you don't want this bill, move to El Salvador. This was literally her speech. Just as a gut check here, you don't lead by having the most onerous legislation. Money flows to where it's the freest. So the idea that this is going to make that surveillance and excess regulation and cronyism is going to make the United States the crypto capital of the world is false on its very face. None of this even makes any sense. I don't even know why that propaganda would work. I don't even know if that propaganda is working, because as I said, when I've analyzed the traffic it seems like they're mostly bots. And I've even asked people, because I'm now finally starting to get traffic on my feed. I'm not finding very many actual people that aren't paid lobbyists, that aren't working directly for the companies, that are actually like, oh yeah, I'm really gung-ho about this. That Paul Barron article, the comments in there showed to me, that was my first bit of proof that, most people don't know anything about this, but those that are following it kind of have a gut check that says, yeah, this doesn't sound right. Real-time tracking of all of my transactions, giving my financial information to foreign central banks. This doesn't seem like this clarity is going to provide benefit or economic freedom to anyone in the world. So anyway, this is where we are. I discuss here, kill clarity, whatever, repeal the Genius Act. But the reality is, politically, there is no solution, as I've stated over and over again. This is why we actually have to use alternatives. This is why the answer to using, the way I view it is, I view Zano as kind of my version of digital gold. I invest in it because it's the cryptocurrency that is used. It's the infrastructure that's used to tokenize all of the other assets. And so every asset that is privately tokenized, there are fees associated with that. Those fees involve Zano. So people actually have to buy Zano to do transactions. There's an actual inherent fundamental business model and reason for the price of Zano to go up. But when you think about stablecoins, Freedom Dollar is the answer to USAT. It's the answer to USDC. It's the answer to these government-regulated stablecoins. It is a stablecoin that, yes, is pegged to the dollar, but it is not backed by U.S. Treasuries. It's backed by over-collateralized Zano. So you're not helping to expand the debt of the country by $3 trillion, which is now the new number that Besant has. He thinks that the Genius Act will lead to $3 trillion worth of treasuries being purchased to back these stablecoins. Freedom Dollar doesn't do that. It's backed by over-collateralized, and you can't freeze it, and you can't stop the transactions. This is why these things are important. So when I talk about these, this is why I don't talk about price. I want people to understand we have to have the ability to engage in voluntary trade outside of the digital prison system. And we need to be able to have a payment mechanism, and we need to be able to trade and own our other assets. This is why this technology is important. So anyway, but that's it. I guess that took longer than I thought. There's a little bit of redundancy because I talked about it a little bit too much at the beginning. Happy to, I have not actually sent around any links, so I don't know if anybody's even going to have the ability to join here, but I'll put the link in. If you want to join the live chat, here's the link, and I'm going to send this around to some other people as well. And as I said, I have to get off a little bit early because I have another interview I have to do at 9, and I need to get ready for this. And it looks like I have 3 more interviews tomorrow. So anyway, so I think this is big. I think that the proof here is indisputable. This is information that we've never had before, and there's more. Like I said, I think it's probably going to take a month to get through these Epstein files or more. And it's not just me getting through it. It's me getting it to the site, and obviously everybody crowdsourcing it, not just through Technocracy Atlas, but there's so much more there. There's so many other pieces. And I want to say on the conspiracy front, there's something. I did a podcast about Nasara and Jassara and the debt jubilee and this narrative that people are spinning about XRP and XLM being part of the reboot of the financial system, and they're going to, tokenize gold and they're going to eliminate everybody's debt and like tokenize gold and give it to them on XRP and XLM. And I've got to tell you, I don't have like direct evidence for this, but this has Steve Bannon all over it. The one and I say that Steve Bannon is all over advising Epstein, but the one thing that you can tell from the interactions back and forth, conversation, so on and so forth, his populism shtick is completely fake. I mean, like they're like laughing their ass off about this. I remember in 2016, Bannon would come to New Hampshire and he'd make this thing. It was sounding like we're going to bring blue collar jobs back to America. And he's one of these guys that's out there he was really pushing the, nationalism and China's bad thing. I mean, and behind the scenes, you look at his background at venture capital, private equity, investment banking, working with Jeffrey Epstein. This thing is a complete construction. Steve Bannon was hired to make Epstein's image look good, to repair his image after all of this. You may have seen there's a high def video going around. I want to say there was something like maybe 16 hours total of footage. And it's all this fake narrative. And you read the back and forth between Bannon and Epstein about even the way that they're going about doing it. Well, we need to make sure that we, downplay the pedophilia and upsell and rehab your image as a philanthropist. And you are seeing the worst and most vile sausage being made. So there's so much to go through. And if once I get the Technocracy Atlas thing, if you're interested in some of this, where I think this is going to be successful is, people have different interests. I know Courtney's interested in the digital bio convergence, and that's a huge area for Epstein as well. The thing that we're finding about this is that he's literally in the middle of everything. There's an email where he's emailing, I think it's Ehud Barak or Peter Thiel. I can't even remember which one it was, but about the fact that they're going to be able to make a lot of money out of the situation in Ukraine. There is stuff there, and I know Mike Benz has talked about others, and I'm not going to spend time or even act like I know a lot of detail or information about that, because there are other people picking other specific areas. And so if there's an area that you're interested in, you can truly become the expert on this, because in mapping the relationships and mapping the timelines of what's going on here, I will tell you this, we're going to have a completely different view of how the entire world operates. And my hope is that when this happens, people will finally understand why we're not voting our way out of this. This is like, we're beyond late Rome. And the fact that, talking to people that were like, yeah, Watergate, people were like demoralized about Watergate. We're like struggling to get people agitated about the fact that we've got emails back and forth where they're talking about torturing and killing children. Like if there were ever a time where you would think that there would be pitchforks and people in the streets, you would think maybe that murdering children and doing this with heads of state and so on and so forth, and people kind of manipulating our monetary system and people manipulating all aspects of media and the economy. Again, we're looking at this. Looks like Epstein was involved with the guy behind 4chan, and Ghislaine Maxwell had a massive influence over Reddit. And remember the whole Maxwell empire. I mean, they're responsible for textbooks. They're responsible for, quote, peer-reviewed science. Like, we're talking the systems that control everything. We're talking about emails between Epstein and Bill Gates talking about pandemics and, kind of precursor to COVID stuff in 2015. So it's going to take all of us, everyone in the world who has an interest in this, being able to access this data and put this together. But what I'll tell you is people's understanding and view of the world should be completely changed by this. This should be just kind of a massive, massive transformation. And I am going to continue to do interviews, as many interviews as I can. I thought it was going to be mostly on clarity, but frankly, I actually think this interconnection of things, which I want to get more detail, I think that there's probably smoking gun stuff on Tether. And so I'm going to pull all of that together. And at the end of it, it's going to be like, man, if you need a reason to not use Tether. I mean, so again, I want to recap what Tether is. Tether is a digital programmable token that can be frozen, that at best is backed by U.S. treasuries that fund U.S. government policy and tyranny around the world, where the biggest economic beneficiary is Howard Lutnick, Epstein's neighbor. And when you even look back, by the way, some of the files that come up about even his own hearings and money laundering and things like this, I mean, this is just, so when you use Tether, you're putting your energy behind that. Every time you use Tether, you're supporting everything that's going on. And by the way, look at what Tether is doing. We talked about this last week. Tether's now buying gold. They're buying land. Like, talk about taking nothing and bluffing your way to the point where you're now getting basically the blessing of the state, and then you're using that to convert and buy other assets. What an absolute scam. So in any event, I know it's somewhat complicated, but man, hopefully we can get the word out. And I know I'm harsh sometimes with these Bitcoin maxis, and a lot of these people literally don't know any better. And so it's tough. So for me, my anger is with the people that were there in 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015 that professed that they were libertarian and know better, and are still, they're the ones that are pushing the propaganda. They're the ones that are still pushing have fun staying poor. They're the ones pushing all of this stuff and kind of building this tribalism around meaningless phrases that are disconnected from the underlying reality of what Bitcoin is. The people that constructed that, those people I'm upset with. The other people I'm actually somewhat, I have some compassion for, but at the same time, they have to wake up. And the most important thing, because we are at that point, what's going on right now, you're seeing a dump on retail. When Paul Atkins, the head of the SEC, comes up and says, we're going to open up the $12.5 trillion 401k market to cryptocurrency, what that means is they're dumping on retail. They're dumping on unsophisticated investors who are going to end up owning this junk through financial advisors, and they won't even necessarily know that they own it, because they're going to try to push it into a 401k or into some product where it's one asset amongst a bunch of other things. And so somebody who's just working their job every day, and their employer says, hey, here are 3 different funds that you can invest in, or maybe you don't even get the choice. Here's the fund that you're in. And boom, now they own this stuff. That's how the SEC works. The SEC is there to make sure that the average person can invest in startups, and that the wealthy people that can invest in the early stages, by the time they manufacture a narrative that it's safe, they're dumping it on everyone else. And they're using these financial vehicles and these financial advisors to do it. In my opinion, the way that we stop the Bitcoin scam isn't debating with Bitcoin maxis. It's going to the public. It's warning your friends and warning your family. I put out a tweet yesterday. By the way, I'm grateful that these are popular. All I did was analyze the terms of service of the Bitcoin ETF. I did this, by the way, with the X terms of service. As we've talked about before, the whole reason I created Own Nothing is that what I learned writing some of these articles and researching this stuff is we already own nothing. We've signed all of these contracts. Well, some of the worst contracts are related to these financial products related to Bitcoin. The BlackRock ETF says they can increase the size from the supply above 21 million. It says it can be confiscated. There's no real protection if somebody hacks and steals the ETF. It's garbage. Not only do you not have possession of the asset, but you don't have any protection. And so so I get angry about the propaganda of seeing an ad for Fidelity or an ad from BlackRock or frankly, some asshole on CNBC that's out there, pitching how exciting this is. I mean, how many times do we have to see, I don't even watch CNBC. I don't even have a TV, but I see the clips on the feed, and it's like every day for the past 4 years, it's been somebody going on CNBC saying that $220,000 is the price target for Bitcoin. I mean, and so, but the average person doesn't know better. The people that are getting fleeced are the people that are watching CNBC and actually think that these people are providing objective advice, providing any analysis. I will say, if I had the time, I would take all of the CNBC transcripts from the beginning of time, and I would take every prediction anyone ever made, and then I would map it to what actually happened. And you'd bury CNBC. But this is the battleground now is stopping the propaganda. Stopping the propaganda that Bitcoin maxis have been spewing, and they've suppressed the best people at communicating this information. So it's up to us. It's up to all of us. And so, yeah, I will be combative online, and I'm going to continue every time the price drops. I was sitting around today. All right, every time it drops $1,000, I'm going to put out a new tweet. And so this new tweet, I'm going to focus on kind of like this angle. Like I'm going to focus on the angle that, oh, did you know that based on the drop in price today, the cost to mine a Bitcoin is now $20,000 more than the price that it can be sold for on the open market. This is a big deal. If this trend continues, these mining operations spend tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. They have rent. They have mining equipment that they're paying leases on. They have employees. They can't afford a drop like this. They can't sustain this. And so then you know what happens? They have to dump the Bitcoin that they have. This is a death spiral, is what happens with this. Bitcoin mining is a stupid business now that there are no transaction fees. So one of the things about hobbling the block size is you've ruined the underlying economics of Bitcoin. The whole point of Bitcoin wasn't that people are just going to be gambling for these fees. I'm solving a math problem, and then we're going to add almost no transactions. But as long as the price goes up forever, I'm going to be able to make a return on my $100 million worth of equipment and electricity. That's essentially what Bitcoin mining has come to. It was supposed to be, we're doing 25,000 transactions per second. We are providing a decentralized network for people all over the world to be able to engage in trade at scale. We're going to make millions of dollars of fees because people are using it. That was taken away. That's what Epstein funded. So there are fundamental structural problems with Bitcoin, and Lightning Network doesn't fix it, because Lightning Network moves, the thing that Blockstream created that Epstein invested in, has people doing these transactions on a second layer. There are no fees that go to the miner. They're all being done on the second layer. Blockstream and Epstein, they're collecting those fees. They've destroyed the underlying model. And so, Jeffrey is vindicated here. Jeffrey understood the beauty of the original economic model and understood that, well, gee, how are you going to do this? Now you've taken a system where there are no transactions. What are the economic incentives? How does this system work? It doesn't work. So, in any event, I've babbled on here, and I have not been doing a good job sending these invitations. If anyone wants to join in, or you can actually just put questions in the chat as well. But I'm going to put this video out. I'm going to put my interview with Jeffrey out, and one thing I'm also behind on is all these other interviews. I need to put clips out because not everybody or many people are going to listen to 2-3 hours of this or necessarily read all these articles. I want to get some of the clips out, but it's important for me to have the comprehensive article, because what I don't like is, inevitably you put out a small clip and then somebody's like, oh, well, you're an idiot. You didn't think of this. When in reality, it's like, all right, here's the 40-page document. You don't even understand the context. So it's kind of putting all of the pieces together, the deep research and the deep detail, but then also having the hooks and being able to put the information out to help people to look at it in different ways. There are a lot of people out there, I can tell from my comments, these people have never read the white paper. They don't understand how it works. They're literally parroting these catchphrases. I'm not mad at them. I'm frustrated at the people that pushed the propaganda that got it to this place. But our battleground is the general public. And I will say, when I talk to people that are, let's just say they're newly awakened but intelligent people, their gut reaction is that Bitcoin is a scam. So the only way they would end up in Bitcoin is if they didn't know they were in Bitcoin because it was stuffed in there through a financial product. The only way others would end up with Bitcoin is if governments, were using state-based reserves, or at the state level or the national level. People inherently are not interested in this. So this is the thing that we have to stop. We have to stop the banking lobby and the crypto lobby, which is essentially Coinbase with Epstein's money, from passing legislation that will allow a politician to say, gee, aren't we patriotic? We're the crypto capital of the world because we're going to dump all of this on retail. One other thing, the Trump family got liquidated today, $10 million worth of Bitcoin because of their World Liberty Financial thing. I don't even know what the transaction was, but they had a margin call and they had to sell $10 million worth. There's a cascade of liquidations here. There's a whole bunch of stuff that will continue to happen. There are, I have to be careful because they keep sending cease and desist letters, but there are people claiming that Binance is in trouble and people are withdrawing their money from Binance. And if Binance goes down, I would expect a 25% drop immediately in the crypto market because Binance does huge volume and there's a lot of interconnected stuff. When you dig into all of this, again, when you find out the kind of shenanigans and wash trading and things that are done with stable coins that are printed out of thin air and everything else, if that locks down, if that seizes up like it did with FTX, you have no idea what you're going to see across the board. And then people playing with leverage and everything else, the system is highly volatile. So my advice is, the advice I will give you is this: do not leave any crypto on an exchange. I have been saying this for forever. Exchanges are fundamentally not safe. I have a chapter on it in my book. The history of this going back to Mt. Gox, which, by the way, one of the other emails is Brock Pierce talking about with Epstein trying to buy Mt. Gox. There's some correspondence back and forth about that. That was the largest cryptocurrency exchange at one point. That was hacked. You have FTX. You have Quadra something or other. It was a Canadian exchange where the founder, quote, died under mysterious circumstances, but that somehow he had all of the funds on his computer. So there's not a long-standing history or track record here. And so all you have is risk. You have risk across the board. You have risk of it being hacked. You have risk that they don't have the reserves. You have risks of government regulators. So usually when I say this, and so I can't tell you how many times I have said this and people didn't listen to me. And I feel bad when people that have listened to me, I should have listened to you. Yeah, please listen to me now. Get your crypto off of the exchange. It's not safe. And it's particularly not safe in times of volatility. And more broadly, everything that I talk about when we talk about solutions, we're in an area of, incredible volatility across the board, and you want to have possession of as many of your assets as you can. And when you go through this process with your investment funds and everything else, you realize you actually don't have a lot of ownership of these assets. So take that out, and do your own research. Obviously don't just accept what I have to say at face value, but read Hijacking Bitcoin, read my article, and dig in and do your own research and look at the Epstein files yourself. You can go to the DOJ site and you can do some searches, and then Technocracy Atlas will have better ways of getting access to all of this information. But look at the information yourself. Look at it directly. And if you're in Bitcoin, ask yourself why do you think it would recover? And an acceptable answer isn't just because there are all of these cycles. I posted this thing that said, one of the things that, it's not like it's a lot of data. Like 15 years worth of data is not a lot of data, but people try to extrapolate these trends and say, well, this is going to be this way forever. And usually when there's a cycle, an up cycle, the general rule of thumb is that during the next cycle, the low is going to be, the high from the previous cycle. You're never going to drop below that. Well, we blew through that today. The high of the last cycle was $69,000. At some point today, we dropped to 61,000 something. I haven't even looked at what the price is right now. So be very critical about this. I mean, I get a little tested, but some guy today is like, well, I have 3 sons, and my son's future and generational wealth is in Bitcoin. And I'm like, I don't even know what to do with that, because this guy's watched 20 podcasts of 20 people saying the same thing. I did, one of the listeners here, and if you're listening right now, I won't give you a shout out. I know you like your privacy, but he sent me, he's like, hey, have you seen some of these Bitcoin Maxi podcasts? And I watched the one that he sent me, and all they were talking about was Michael Saylor's company and whether it'll be added to the S&P. Like, there's zero talk about people using Bitcoin or any aspect of it. It's people sitting there celebrating the fact that a yet another third party that is borrowing money from the public to buy Bitcoin might be put on some other exchange, which means that because it's on that exchange, other investment vehicles will automatically buy it. And I, you know, and in a broad sense, people are sitting around, whether it's gold or silver or whatever it is, there are a lot of people just sitting around saying, well, you know, which asset? There's so much time of people sitting around saying, well, yeah, if I buy enough of this asset, well, if you buy enough of this asset, what? You're going to just sit on it and then the entire economy is going to improve? I've got news for you. We have to build things. The whole point of money is to be a medium of exchange so that people can engage in economic activity. When everybody's time is spent hoarding what they think might become the medium of exchange or store of value, nobody's creating anything. So there is no situation. What the Bitcoin maxis have done is they've constructed this concept of a citadel. I had somebody quote me on this today. I may have been the same guy with 3 kids. No, I think this was somebody else. He's like, well, I'm all set. I'm going to be in a citadel in the clouds with my Bitcoin and my self-possession. What kind of world is this? How do you think that's going to work? That's how bad the propaganda is. And this has been pushed by the Bitcoin Standard. There's a whole bunch of people, Max Kaiser. There are people that have engineered this. And you know what? With what we've seen with Epstein and Steve Bannon and the way that they have manipulated a lot of the stuff, the way that they're really good at damage control, the way that they're good at positioning, the way that they're good at marketing. I mean, if you can rehab a pedophile into a philanthropist, what do you think that they're doing to come up with Diamond Hands in the Citadel? How do you think they came up with QAnon? And I do get frustrated. The people that got ripped off from Nasara and Jassara, people that stopped paying their mortgages, and a lot of these look like they're elderly women that don't have hope. That seemed to be a big category for this. People just like, well, this person said Nasara and Jassara's coming. We're going to have a debt jubilee. And, you know, this is one of these things where it's like they predicted it 1,000 times in a row and it didn't happen. And people are still sitting there believing that this is going to happen. And it's tough. I mean, you know, look, I blame the Federal Reserve. We don't have sound money. We have a completely fraudulent financial system, and that's put people into this position. But the only way out is to build. The only way out is to engage in voluntary trade and to get rid of this just massive collection of parasites that infect everything with multiple layers of regulation and intermediaries and all of this other stuff. It's got to go, and it's infected Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not, you know, I got my transaction the first time I got a transaction, it's like, wow, this is magical. Somebody sent me money. There was no bank. It was instant. And now I'm going to buy a Bitcoin treasury company that's going to store the Bitcoin at Coinbase. And I'm going to hope that it's put on the S&P list so that some other financial vehicle buys it so that the price goes up. That is not sound money. And that is not going to fix the economy. And that is not going to stop technocracy. So anyway, it is 8:30. I am going to, unless anybody's going to, wants to jump on here, I think I might actually call it for now so I can freshen up before this next interview. But I do encourage you to share this. I'd love to hear your comments on this. I think this is critically important. I think this is the biggest opportunity we've had. I know it's a little bit odd because I know a lot of people are suffering or pissed off or whatever, but look, the truth is finally coming out, and we have to seize the opportunity to get this information out there to as many people as possible, to get this information out to our friends and family, and to stop this fake narrative that has been engineered to you know, enrich the same people that made money in 2008. But the difference is this time they'll get bailed out, and we will literally get a complete digital prison with digital IDs, digital currencies, and AI surveillance. This is exactly what's being put up. And every time, you know, people always speculate, what's the event going to be? Is it going to be a false flag? How is this going to happen? Are they going to do it nicely or whatever? It's like, you know, this stuff is going on. We're getting emergency legislation of the order of the Patriot Act and the CARES Act without an emergency and without any resistance. This has got to be the first time that I've seen that in this country happen, where you're getting massive surveillance added without a cause, without a generative cause, but it's being masked. They're putting it in in saying that it's about crypto freedom and innovation. They're putting surveillance in and they're calling it innovation. This is not acceptable. And we have an opportunity now because the absolute truth is out and it's horrendous. And I said this at the beginning, but it's true. These Bitcoin maxis, and you know who you are, and I know who you are, and I know some of you. If you're going to continue to try to spin what's going on, if you're going to read these Epstein files and you're going to continue to try to spin this, your reputation will never come back. All right. So with that said, I will, let's see, which song we play on the way? On the way out, I think I'll play Truth Cascade. This is the working, I don't know, maybe we'll do another contest to see what should be the anthem. I was going to do a demonstration of Technocracy Atlas, but this stuff is too important. We'll get to that other stuff later. So I'm going to play Truth Cascade. This is the Technocracy Atlas theme song, tentatively. All right. Have a good night. See you next Thursday at 6 p.m.
One name, ran it through Google Images, reverse searching, no shame. Found 3 more photos, found a flight log, found a date. Cross-reference with public records, now I'm up to 8. Tagged it in the Discord, someone found the company, someone else found the offshore account and believe. Someone else found the board members, the donations, the chain. Now we got 47 people mapping the campaign. 1 becomes 2, becomes 10, becomes more. Truth has a network effect we can't ignore. Every connection reveals 10 more doors. This is the cascade, this is the score. Truth cascade, watch it domino. One investigation leads to another, watch it go. Truth cascade, we can't stop the flow. Every cover up connected, now the whole world knows. Cascade, 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 truth cascade. Can't be delayed. Metadata embedded in the image. We extracted the GPS from the location, from the property records, found the LLC, found the shell company, found the parent corp, found the CEO. Cross-reference biblical donations, now we got the quid pro quo. Someone made a spreadsheet, someone made a map, someone made a timeline, someone made a slab, someone made a TikTok, read 2 million views in a day. Someone made a GitHub repo, organized the array. 1 becomes 5, becomes 50, becomes spread. Truth is exponential once it leaves your head. Every whistleblower empowers 10 more instead. This is the cascade, this is the thread. Truth cascade, watch it domino. 1 investigation leads to another, watch it go. Truth cascade, we can't stop the flow. Every cover up connected, now the whole world knows. Cascade, 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 truth cascade, cascade, can't be delayed. They try to compartmentalize, separate the scandals, keep the connections hidden, but we're digital vandals, taking down the walls between the separate lives, watching the cascade reveal the enterprise. 1 truth leads to another, 1 name leads to another, 1 dot leads to another, 1 thread, that's the cascade. Truth cascade, watch it domino. 1 investigation leads to another, watch it go. Truth cascade, we can't stop the flow. Every cover up connected, now the whole world knows. Cascade, truth cascade, it's exponential. 1 person finds a thread, becomes existential. Truth cascade, it's consequential. Every secret that they bury now is preferential. Cascade. 500 connection. That's the Cascade. That's the power.
I woke up to silence, but the war had begun. They froze my account, said I'd done something wrong. Wasn't no crime, just living free. Now the system got a chain on me.
They took my savings, my future, my land, with a single code line and a government hand. Said it was safety, said it was green, but all I see is tyranny behind the screen. This ain't innovation, it's a trap in disguise. You'll own nothing, be watched all your life. Genius ain't freedom, reality ain't clear. It's a cage they built while we cheer. I believed in the promise, the man with a plan, but the same old swamp just changed its brand. He banned the front door, opened the back, signed the bills that launched the final attack. This ain't innovation, it's a trap in disguise. You'll own nothing, be watched all your life. Genius ain't freedom, reality ain't clear. It's a cage they built while we cheer. Your gold, your guns, your voice, your name. They'll digitize it all, then shift the blame. Palantirizing AI chains, freedom dying slow in patriotic flames. This ain't about safety, it's control in disguise. With your ID, your face, your tears, your time, they wrapped it in stars, sold it with pride. But freedom's bleeding out from the inside. DEFCON 1, and they call it peace, but I still got breath. I still believe we can break the code, escape the scheme, turn this nightmare back into a dream.